really believe that we are going to experience the miraculous in the month of March. I'm declaring that this will be a month of the miraculous, and understanding that I'm expecting the miraculous. I thought a good way for us to position ourselves for the miraculous is to look at some miracles in the Gospels and deconstruct them. What do I mean by that? I mean by look at why they were miraculous, why they happened, the elements that caused them to come to pass, and see if we can't learn how to position ourselves to experience similar things this month. And I believe God is going to do some amazing things. I'm going to do something very different here at the beginning, and I hope that if you're a first-time guest, I don't do this kind of stuff often. In fact, I don't know that I have ever done what I'm about to do. But as I was praying at the beginning of this week, I canceled all of my meetings on Monday. I cleared my schedule, and I spent the entire day Monday in fasting and prayer and just staying before the Lord to get some clarity about some things that I was concerned about. Last Sunday, I believe God spoke to us very clearly through Pastor Zach Strong. And Pastor Zach Strong also spoke very clearly in my life just in one-on-one conversations. But I thought to myself, normally I would just go back to work on Monday and say, well, that was a good day. But I said, no, I need to go deeper on this. And so I spent some time in fasting and prayer on Monday, and I received some clarity about several things that were greatly concerning me. But one thing that I started to amass was a level of faith that I haven't had for a little while. And I began to declare, because you see, I can't tell you all the details, and some of it may not even make a whole lot of sense, but I'm believing God for some financial blessing, because right now I've had Pastor Doug get estimates on projects that we need to do. They need to happen for us to go where we're supposed to go. And would you like to know how much money I could spend tomorrow if I had it? I could easily spend $250,000 tomorrow with projects, not that I'm imagining, projects we've had estimates for. We have estimates for them. We know what they'll cost. And there are some things in the works to fund some of those things. But I'm telling you, I believe God is getting ready to do something significant in and through us, and we're going to move at the speed of the provision. We have vision that is greater than our provision, and there comes a point when that just won't remain true, because provision will overtake the vision at some point. There is a season, and Pastor Doug was praying in my office this morning, and he said something profound. He said, when the foundation is laid, everything else goes so much more quickly. And I believe and he was declaring that we are laying the finishing touches to the foundation. So prepare yourself, because things are about to speed up. But I began to declare a specific number, and mind you, I have that specific number and more already promised. It's supposed to be coming from a source, but it's being a delayed source. If you must know, it's the Internal Revenue Service, which is a often delayed source when they're sending you money. They don't like it when we're delayed sending them money. Come on, somebody. But I know I got some money that we're going to have that's going to position us to go in that direction. We have some grant funding that we're in the middle of possibly procuring that's going to help us move in a certain direction. But I said, Lord, I'm believing that you are our provider, and I'm calling out a number. And I said a number that I believe God is going to give us that has nothing to do with the grant money, has nothing to do with the IRS money, and has nothing to do with any regular giver in this house. And I heard the Lord say, while I was at my wife's part-time job cleaning Wednesday evening, he said, look in that camera and say, there's somebody, whether you're watching live or by the replay, that you have watched our ministry, but you have a home church. I don't know if you're in this city or outside of this city. You have a home church where you tithe and you give, but there's some reason you've been watching our online ministry and you see something here and it sparks something inside of you, and God has been moving on you to send a significant gift. And I want to speak to you today to say, now is the time, this is the season. Contact our office, let us know, because we will take it in Bitcoin, we'll take it in stock options, we'll take it cash check. Because God is speaking to your heart. And I don't know who you are and I don't know where you are, but I was throwing that trash in that trash can, and he said, do it on Sunday morning. So I did it. Now we'll see what happens. John chapter 6, verse number 1. After these things, Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, when a great crowd followed him because they saw his signs, which he did for the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountain, and he sat there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was near, when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming to him. He said to Philip, where shall we buy bread that these may eat? He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for each of them to receive but a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon, Peter's brother, said to him, there is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many? And Jesus said, make the people sit down. Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down, numbering about 5,000. And Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those who were sitting down. And likewise they distributed the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were filled, he told his disciples, collect the fragments that remain, that nothing may be lost. And so they collected them and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. If I was going to title this first part of this series, I would call it this: Looking for a Miracle. Looking for a miracle. Something I want you to understand just as a baseline for our concept this morning is that I read to you one of the 4 accounts of this exact miracle. There are 4 gospel narratives that we have in the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The reason why there are 4 different gospel narratives is because these were 4 different men who had 4 different perspectives, who were writing to 4 different groups of people, and each of them was highlighting a different aspect of who Jesus was. They were writing to people. Matthew especially was writing to the Jewish people and explaining to them that he was the Messiah. Mark was writing to those showing that he was a suffering servant. Luke was writing to show him as the Son of Man. He wanted people to see his humanity. And John wrote a very theological words, in very theological terms, letting us see that he was in fact the Son of God. Understanding that 4 different men at 4 different times wrote 4 different accounts to 4 different recipients, it is of note to notice that there is only one miracle of Jesus that appears in all 4 stories. Every one of the gospel writers talks about the feeding of the 5,000. There are many miracles that one of them will mention, 2 of them will mention, even a few that 3 will mention. But there is no other miracle Jesus performed that all 4 mentioned this story. Now, the interesting thing about that is if you will read in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because I have this week, and read this story, it's so interesting because since they all tell it from a different perspective. Have you ever talked to some, years ago, they made this movie, and I do not recommend watching it because it's as boring as the day is long. But I don't even remember what it was called, but it was this movie, and the premise was like there was this assassination that took place in this large public gathering. And then I think it was Vantage Point. I think that's what it was called. And the whole movie was telling the 30 minutes before from this person's perspective, and then the shooting would happen. And then it would go to a different person 30 minutes ago and show it from there. And it was amazing how boring that was. But secondly, how differently the story appeared from different vantage points. Because when you looked at it from this vantage point, you're like, well, this is what's happening. But when you looked at it from this other person's vantage point, you said, no, this is. And when you put it all together, it was hard to really put it, because we all see it from different places. And so this story, it's interesting because each gospel writer has his own little twist on the story. And when you put them all together, you get a full account of exactly what happened. First of all, understand this. Before this miracle happened, Jesus was having great success in ministry. In fact, he was having too much success in ministry. People were always around. And so what moved them to make this transition was Jesus said, I believe it was in Mark, that he said, we got to get away because we don't even have time to eat. So he told his disciples, we got to go somewhere to get away from some people because I know we're all hungry, we're all tired, we need a break. And so it's on that context that they go across the sea. When they get there, a crowd is already waiting for them and is already looking to them. The first thing I want you to see when you're looking for a miracle that we see in this text is we must look up at others. You see, one of the gospel accounts, not the one I read to you in John, but I believe it's also in Mark, where Jesus said, we're getting away because we're hungry. We're going to get something to eat. And then when all these people show up, the disciples say, would you please send them away? Because you have to understand the context of the moment. The whole reason they've changed locations is because they're hungry. But now Jesus is looking at all these people who have come, and he's concerned with their hunger. It can get frustrating when God appears to notice your situation just long enough for you to get excited, but before he meets your need, it may seem like he's looking somewhere else. He stops looking at you and starts looking at them. That can get frustrating because, see, here's the thing. Jesus didn't tell them, they didn't tell Jesus, we're hungry. He said, y'all are hungry. Let's get away so we can get something to eat. But then they get away to get something to eat, and then all of a sudden the crowd shows up, and Jesus immediately starts talking about how we're going to feed them. Can you imagine being a disciple in that situation? Hold up. You told us to get away from them because you said we were hungry. Now, I don't know if I missed it, but I have not seen the spread yet. None of us have eaten. And now here they come showing up again. And instead of you saying, hey guys, we got to eat, you look at us, the ones who are still hungry too, and say, how are we going to... I'm going to tell you something that will help you if you'll listen. If you're going to follow Jesus, you're going to have to learn that your needs will often only be met in the service of other people. So many people live in the lack of the miraculous power of God in their personal life because they're waiting on God to do something for them when God is looking to do something through them. And as long as I am focused on me, mine, and my own, I will oftentimes miss the opportunity for the miraculous. Because let me help you with something about miracles. This is a simple principle, but it will change your life. Listen to this. Do you know that there is only one thing that is required before you can receive a miracle? It is universal. Every miracle throughout Scripture, every miracle throughout history has this one thing. There are so many different people in so many different cultures, in so many different circumstances, in so many different ways that receive miracles. But this one thing is universal. You want to know what it is? You can't have a miracle till you have a problem. You cannot experience the miraculous power of God until you are living in some level of human insufficiency. As long as I can, I will. But it is when I can't that I learn that he can. It is his power is evidenced, but it cannot be evidenced until a problem presents itself. And here's another truth that connects with it. The level of my miracle is always proportional to the level of my problem. Some of you walk in this morning and you've got some little problems. Well, congratulations. You qualify to believe for a little miracle. But some of you walked in here today and you got some big problems. Congratulations. You've qualified for a big miracle. And see, what happens is when it's 12 guys who are hungry, that's the problem. But it's one that Papa John's can solve. It's one that Little Caesars can take care of for just under $100. It's pretty possible to handle. It may take a little bit of organizing. It may take a little bit of strategizing, but it's doable. But when you go from 12 guys to 5,000 men plus their women and children, now you need to call regional. There isn't a Papa John's and a Little Caesars that's going to be able to cater this conference. You're going to have to get a hold of a regional. This has just gone to another level. And when Jesus starts talking about it, they start saying, well, even if we had a year's wages, it wouldn't pay for all these people to eat. It's not even near enough. Even an entire year's wages wouldn't get this done. It is such an overwhelming need. But notice it is when they open their eyes and begin to see this need that it begins the process of unleashing an overwhelming miracle. And I'm submitting to you today that if we want to see the miraculous active in our life, one of the key proponents is we've got to stop looking at our own personal needs and begin to tie my own personal need to needs that are much bigger than me. We spent yesterday, and I may talk a little bit more about it as we go this morning, but we spent all day yesterday in a training with backyard orphans. And we're talking about adoption and foster care and ministry to those who are dealing in those two arenas of the world. And we talked about the vast need that is in the world and the vast need that is in our nation, in our state, and even in our city. And when you begin to talk about it, it begins to become overwhelming as you recognize the size of the need. When you begin to look at our city and you look at the homeless issues, you look at the drug issues, you look at the poverty issues, it can become overwhelming when you look at it. But what if you stopped worrying about yourself and started letting God give you a compassion for It makes it seem less possible, but it makes the miraculous more probable. Maybe God will move to feed your 12. But we know we have 4 documented testimonies that he will move to feed the 5,012. We have multiple examples of someone said, no, he'll move in this case. And I'm submitting to you that if you want the miraculous, it's not about overlooking or not recognizing your need, but it's about not being so focused on your need that you forget that the God you serve is bigger than you and bigger than your need. And if you will start making your faith demand for bigger than just what I need, you may be blown away by what God can use you to bring to pass. You got to look up at others. You got to stop focusing on your own needs and see the needs around you. We miss the miraculous when we allow our own needs or our perceived insufficiency to take our focus off the needs of others around us. The second thing I want you to see this morning is we must not only look up to others, look up for others, but we must look around for what we have. Jesus begins the process of this miracle by taking inventory. He asks the disciples what they have. Philip begins with, we have nothing. Andrew interjects with, well, there is this boy that went to Long John Silver's on the way, and he got a 2-piece dinner. What they recognized was that they had nothing before they ever even took inventory. Philip said, we don't have anything. But then Andrew said, we got this boy. See, too many times in our lives, we see the size of the need around us, and we immediately assume that there's nothing of value in us. I can't do this. I can't fix this. I can't solve this. I don't have the position. I don't have the possessions. I don't have the prestige. I don't have the power. Now, if I was so-and-so, if I was in such and such position, if I had this amount of money, then we immediately assume I can't. And I'm afraid there are far too many believers that are looking at the world today and they are walking in this attitude. It is what it is. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to change it? How am I going to affect it? And as long as that's how you look at life, as how you look at situations and circumstances, there is nothing you can do. There is no change you can make. There is no solution that you can bring about. But what about if you stopped worrying about what you don't have and start looking at what you might have? See, because the first thing they did is they overlooked something that was available. I know it wasn't much, but there was 2 pieces of fish and 5 small rolls. It's not much, but it's there. I want to help somebody this morning that you have assumed that you have nothing to give to God. You have nothing to give in service to your community. You have nothing to give even in service to the kingdom and to the local body. You say, I don't have a lot of gifts. I don't have a lot of talents. I don't have a lot of money. I don't. But I want to promise you something. In your saying I don't, you have overlooked something that you do. I can guarantee you, it may not be much, but there's something in you. Y'all quiet this morning. You have to understand that inside you, inside every one of you, not the real good believers that are real good and saved, that's been following Jesus since they got out of the nursery. Invite in every one of you, including the ones that got high last night. In every one of you is divine DNA. You were created in the image of God. And there is a creative capacity within you that was placed there by your Creator. That you, if you have no discernible skill whatsoever, have a mouth to speak and a spirit to believe. And what is that? I'll tell you what that is. It is all you need to frame a different world. Because as you begin to get the word in your heart, begin to believe it and speak it, don't you underestimate. You're overlooking what you have available. You could be praying about situations. Well, Pastor, I don't know how to pray that. Can I help you with something? People who think they know how to pray are really not praying well. Prayer is not something I know how to do. Prayer is something I just give myself to. Because some days it's this way, and some days it's that way. Some days I feel stuff, and some days I don't feel nothing. But I give myself to prayer, and I don't necessarily know how it's going to go, what it's going to look like, what it's going to sound like, what it's going to be about. But I'm going to go, and I'm going to take my spirit, and I'm going to take my faith, and I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to get myself before my God, and I'm going to give myself to him to be a vessel, because I do not pray to beg him to do what I want him to do. I pray to come in agreement with what he's already planned to do and release it on the earth. And anybody can do that. You've overlooked some stuff. But there's some of you here today that you're like the little boy. You may feel overlooked because what you have isn't much, but you say, I got something. I know it's not fancy. I know it's not flashy. I know it's not steak and potatoes. I know it's not 150,000 pepperoni pizzas, but I do have 2 pieces of fish. And I do have 5 rolls in my hand. And they're not much, but they're here. And they're mine. And you have to come to a place where you are willing to stop underestimating their value, because though they may not be what you think you need, they are what you have. And we serve a God who has an amazing capacity of taking what I have and turning it into what I need. But he cannot turn it into what I need until I recognize that Thank you so much. When God shows up, he shows you a need and then asks you for resources. You need to be very careful not to overlook or underestimate what he's already placed in your hand. Because the insufficiency of the resource is not in its amount, it's in its possession. Because the third thing is, if you'll look up and see others around you, and you'll look around at what you have. Third, you can look at God work a miracle. Because you see, what happened is they said, we don't have anything. Well, actually, we do have one meal, these 5 fish, 2 loaves, or 2 fish, 5 loaves. I don't know which would have been better. 5 fish and 2 loaves, or it wasn't a lot of food either way. They said, this is what we do have. And then something significant happened. They took the fish and the loaves and they gave them to Jesus. Understand something. In the hands of the little boy, the 2 fish and 5 loaves were at best enough to sustain him till that evening. Wasn't enough for him to eat for the next 12 days. It was enough for him to eat that meal, one little meal, a snack. It was just enough for him. When he put it in the hands of the disciples, it was not even enough for them to enjoy a finger food buffet amongst themselves. 12 disciples, 7 pieces of food. You do the math. Somebody's not getting something, or they're all getting less than half of something. But they put it in the hands of Jesus. Same resource, several different hands. In the hands of the little boy, it's barely enough for me. In the hands of the disciples, it's not quite enough for we. But in the hands of Jesus, it's more than we need to feed an entire community. Because the insufficiency of the resource was not how few pieces of food it was. It was whose hands it was in. The moment it got in Jesus' hands, it went from being insufficient to all sufficient. Because what we read in the story is that they all ate until everybody had had at least a couple bites of food. That's not what your Bible says. In all 4 accounts, one thing they all agree on is that nobody left hungry. Every person in the gathering ate until they could not eat another bite. They were completely fulfilled and filled, going, oh my word, I don't know how I'm going to walk home. I am stuffed. And then there were 12 baskets full left over. What happened? All that happened was a transition of possession of a resource from me who is not enough to a God who is more than enough. And I want to submit to some people in this room. Some of you have overlooked what God has put in you. But many of you are underestimating what God has put in you because you have assumed that since you have just enough, you're supposed to consume it for your own salvation, and you're living a just enough life. But what if you recognize that it's barely enough for me? It's not enough for we. But if I put it in the hands of Jesus, it might become enough for everybody. You see, multiplication never happens during consumption or preservation. It only happens in distribution. The food did not multiply in their mouths. The food did not multiply sitting on the side. They didn't set it over there and go, Lord, make it more, make it more, make it more. The multiplication took place in the act of distribution. As they began to, Jesus blessed it, he broke it, and he began to give it. And as he began to give it, it began to multiply. As he continued to give it, it continued to multiply. The multiplication was not even dictated by the need. It was dictated by the continual distribution. They stopped at 12 basketfuls. We can talk theology here. I don't believe they ran out at 12 basketfuls. I believe they stopped because they said, what are we going to do with all this food? Everybody's full and we don't have any refrigerators. So why would we keep breaking off more when we can't even handle what we already have? They stopped the distribution because they had multiplied to a place. Can I tell you that it's possible? I just read in the Old Testament where Moses, building the tabernacle, asked the people to bring their gifts. And they were people who just came out of slavery. They were people who had little or nothing. But they began to bring their gifts. And finally Moses got up and said, stop! We have too much. You have to understand that when you are involved in the distribution portion of the kingdom, you will never run out. You run out when you consume. You run out when you preserve. But when you distribute, as long as you're giving of yourself, you're giving of your finances, you're giving of your time, you're giving of your ability to love on other people, as long as you're giving, then little becomes more and more and more and more and more until it becomes something you don't even have the capacity. Now, what I love about the Gospels is you have 4 stories here, 4 accounts, but not one of them gives us a clear description of what happened with the 12 basketfuls. Now, I've preached 12 basketfuls, 12 disciples. Every disciple got him a basketful. But it's also entirely possible that the 12 disciples followed that little boy home. Because after all, it was his food. Can you imagine if that's what happened? That he comes home, Mama, boy, where's all this food? What's all? You remember the lunch you sent me? Yeah, son, that I just scraped a little something. We don't have a lot in the house. I just scraped together what we had. It wasn't much to get you through the day. He said, oh, Mama, you don't understand. I gave it to Jesus. And there were thousands of people there. And every one of them ate some of the fish out of our house. Every one of them ate some of the bread out of our house. And then we took up all this leftovers, and they said, we can have them, Mama. What a moment of recognition of the sufficiency and the overwhelming abundance that is available when you allow Jesus to be the one who is in control of what you have as your resources. When you put it in his hand, he distributes it and makes it more than enough to meet the needs around you. But then I believe he turns around and releases blessing of abundance upon you. It's amazing what God did in this moment, in this season. And I just got to ask you this morning, have you allowed God to show you the needs of people around you? Have you recognized what God has given you? And have you trusted him enough to release your little into his limitless hands? This has been a significant week for me. I hope that I don't bother you by being honest, but I'm closing right now. But last Sunday, I came to church under a really dark cloud. There are things that are just not working the way I want them to work. Things that are not coming together the way I want them to come together. And I had convinced myself, me and whatever imp that is assigned to me, had convinced me that I was the problem. That I'm a poor leader, and that if I did things better, everything would be better, but I'm the problem, and I need to get out of the way so somebody can do it right. That's how I came to church last Sunday morning. But last Sunday night, I sat down with Pastor Zach Strong, and I just talked with him for a while because he's a spiritual father to me. And I just laid it out, and I was like, man, I think I'm probably done. Don't you think? Don't you think? I mean, like, I've failed. And he said, Ryan, I'm hearing what you're saying. And this is what he said to me. He said, he named two things. He said, if these two things were not the way they are right now, how would you feel? Oh my goodness. Immediately my face changed. My wife said, your whole countenance changed. I said, well, God's moving everywhere else. Every other metric says we're headed in the right direction. He said, so it sounds like to me, you just got a couple things you need God to work out for you. Yeah, that's probably about right. See, because I had allowed the greatness of the need and my perceived insufficient resource to overwhelm me with it can't be done. But all I needed was somebody to say, wait a second. The only problem here is you're holding on to something that you don't have the power to fix. But if you'll put it in the hands of Jesus, the things you can fix, you've already addressed and you've dealt with, and you're headed in the right direction. And the things you can't fix, you know he can. And so I open-handed, here's my lunch, Lord. And let me tell you what happened yesterday. Yesterday, 24 of us. That's fantastic. I don't care what you say. 24 people gave up their Saturday to come to an all-day training, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. because we care about foster kids. And as we were sitting there, understand, Backyard Orphans is an international organization. And I don't know how we did, because they have trainers that go and do these trainings all over the country, all over the world. But we scored. The founder, CEO, lead person was in our building yesterday. And he told us last month, he was in the office of the First Lady of Kenya, where they negotiated a deal where Backyard Orphans will be resourcing the Kenyan church so that the nation of Kenya will be closing every one of their state-run orphanages by 2032 because they know Backyard Orphans is going to help them raise up families within churches so that every child will have a home and they'll no longer have to live in group homes. I tell you that to just give you some context of the fact that this guy doesn't deal in little or insignificant often. Yesterday we went through the whole training. Pastor Doug got a video of the prayer he prayed over us, but right before he prayed, he got up and he said this. He said, "Oh my, I'm about to get emotional." He said, "I've done 200 of these trainings all over the country. And I don't know any other way to say it, but something special is happening here." He was in Kenya negotiating the shift of an entire nation's handling of orphan care a month ago. But he was moved by what he felt in this building. You want to know why? Because it's only 5 loaves and 2 fishes. I know we don't have everything, but I believe we are becoming a house that everything we got, we're putting it in his hands. And I'm telling you, you need to buckle your seatbelt because we are about to watch the abundance of God hit this house at a level we can't even comprehend, where lack is going to be a memory that we laugh about. Not because God blesses us with extravagant houses and cars and no. It's going to be because he blesses us with resources to do kingdom work at such a level that we begin to solve problem after problem. For years, we have had multiple confirmations that we are a lighthouse for this city. And that was as he was getting ready to pray. He said, I don't mean to get prophetic, but I just see this as a lighthouse that is getting ready to shine light all over this region. I share that with you because I need you to understand we're in a very special moment. There's thousands of people around this building that have showed up and they're hungry. And we're sitting here going, can I be honest? I'm hungry. Jesus, I came to church today because I needed to eat. We've been doing stuff, Jesus. You've been with us. We've been doing stuff. Man, we're tired. We're hungry. But I can't quiet the cries. I don't think I'm the only one in this room. It just can't quiet the cries. Because I hear them. I hear the cries of 8-year-old children ripped out of one home at 2:30 in the morning, dropped into another one at 4:30 in the morning, not knowing where they'll be tomorrow, who they'll be with, if they'll ever see their brothers or sisters again. What happened to their mama? All of that. And they're laying in their beds and they're weeping and they're crying because they don't know what they're going to do. And then they're in a home of parents who are like, oh my word, what did I sign up for? We can keep having church. Or we can say, what's in our hand? What do we got? What do we got that could help? It's not much, Jesus, but it's what we got. We'll have a training. We'll put together a team. We'll do what we can to support. We'll support the families already in our church. We'll support families as they stand up in our church. We'll support other churches that want to raise up families that'll do foster. It's not much. It's all we got, Jesus, but we're going to give it to you. We're going to do the best we can. We're going to put together a group on a Monday night that's freedom for folks that are struggling with habits and hurts and hang-ups. And we say, it's not much, but it's what we got, Jesus. And we know our city's hurting. And so we're going to take our 5 loaves. We're going to take our 2 fishes. We're going to give it to you. And it don't matter what it looks like. It matters where it ends up. And if we put it in his hand this morning, stand with me all over the house. Thanks for watching this word today. I hope that it challenged you, and I hope it gave you some practical application for how you can follow Jesus more effectively. If by chance you're watching and you have never made Jesus Lord of your life, let's do that right now. If you just pray these simple words with me, the words aren't magic, but what you're saying, if you believe in your heart, it's going to change your entire life. Dear Jesus, I am a sinner. I believe you are a Savior. I ask you to forgive me. I ask you to cleanse me. And I declare that you are the Lord of my life. And from this day forward, I will follow you to the best of my ability. In Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed that prayer today, we are so excited because you just began the first step of an amazing journey of following Jesus. But one thing's for sure, you can't do this alone. You need community. You need a church family. So please reach out to us. Let us know you prayed the prayer, and we'll give you some next steps about how you can follow Jesus and continue in your faith. Thanks for watching today. We love you, and I hope you'll come back and watch again next week when we have another word that I believe will minister to your life.